Boat maintenance can be a tricky subject with a lot to cover, so we're going to make a series to help you out. Everything you need to know in less than 10 minutes to make your boat maintenance a little more bite-sized, save you some time and hopefully some money. This week, grease. Everything you need to know about grease on your boat in less than 10 minutes. Let's go. There are hundreds of moving parts on a sailboat, and a lot of them need lubrication or they fail prematurely.
Obviously, our winch needed a little bit of a grease job.
They squeak and they groan and they heat up, and they can be downright dangerous if not tended to, not to mention expensive to replace when they fail. So if you can take a few minutes every once in a while to grease all the appropriate places, it'll save you a lot of time and money later. And with hundreds of types of grease out there, it can be hard to know what to buy. So let's cover the ones we're going to need. Grease is nothing more than a lubricant, typically mineral or vegetable-based oil suspended in a thicker substance. That makes grease. That thicker substance to turn the oil into grease is typically made of lithium, aluminum, or calcium. And which one of those we use for what purpose is important. Also important is that we don't mix them. They're often incompatible, so pick the right one and stick with it. First, let's cover dielectric grease. You need this on your boat. Dielectric grease is a non-conductive waterproof substance used to protect electrical connections from corrosion and dirt. Often we see it used on spark plug boots to make sure you can get the plug wire off a few years down the road after hundreds of heat cycles.
Right there. Get a good grip on it. Give it a good pull. Should come right out. You can hear it. There we go.
You'll know it if you didn't use it and you need to change a spark plug later. And if you have a diesel, you're not immune because I bet you your dinghy has spark plugs, or maybe your generator. I also use dielectric grease on my battery terminals. It covers them and protects them from the elements and rust, but it's non-conductive. Then years down the road, when I need to replace the batteries, the terminals can be undone very easily. I also use it on the terminals on my big red 1-2 off switch. Grease number 2 is anti-seize. An anti-seize lubricant is an important tool for anyone who works on their boat. If you never do any of your own work, then it won't really matter. But if you ever plan on taking something apart later, you'll be very thankful you use some anti-seize. It helps to prevent corrosion, reduce friction, and is resistant to high temperatures. To give you an example of a great place to use it, I live in a place where we take the mast down every year, so I put anti-seize on the bolts and the hardware for my wind instruments at the top of the mast to make sure that I can take them off when the mast comes down. If you leave them on the end of the mast, they end up getting broken. Other people always find that their wind hardware is seized onto the masthead because the bolts we use are stainless and the masthead is aluminum. So after a season of sailing, the bolts are usually seized into the masthead. They usually snap the heads right off the bolts. I also use it on the Gypsy for my windlass, and if you have any other metal-to-metal contact that you need to take apart later, anti-seize. Just don't use it on stuff that you never want to come apart, like motor mount bolts or something like that. And grease number 3 is the one we use the most, the multi-purpose grease that we put everywhere else. Grease applications aboard a cruising boat include windlass gears, shafts, clutches, steering cables, sheaves, gears, chains, winches, furler components, thrust bearings, and some stuffing boxes and sea cogs. And multi-purpose grease comes in a few flavors. All greases, whether they're automotive or marine or regular, are comprised of the same 3 basic components: a base oil, a thickener, and then an additive list. One of the most significant parts of the mix is that thickener. The thickener has a significant influence over how the grease will react and behave under different conditions. Some thickeners, such as sodium grease, have poor resistance to water, so not much use to us. Marine greases, on the other hand, tend to be made with water-resistant thickeners, such as calcium or aluminum or some sort of complex lithium component. Calcium sulfonate greases specifically are a very good choice for marine use Due to their excellent resistance to corrosion, marine greases typically contain additives to boost that corrosion resistance that can occur with exposure to salt water. Polymers are often present in marine greases because they can significantly improve the water resistance of a grease and help the grease to stay in place on more crucial components. From a technical standpoint, grease has a few different measurements to determine what it's best used for, and one is the drop-off point or temperature. And if money's no object, calcium sulfonate grease would win. It costs a little bit more, but it's what big industries use, what machine shops use, and anyone who can't afford downtime on their expensive equipment, calcium sulfonate grease. That's the goal, and you can find it all over the place, often marketed as marine grease because its properties stand up well in our tough environments. Calcium sulfonate grease, that's what you want to see on the label. On the other end of the spectrum is lithium grease, which drops off much faster, needs to be replaced much more often. We might use lithium grease on our sail tracks or something like that, but it doesn't last very long. Much like oil, grease needs to be changed too, as it becomes contaminated with dirt and dust and metal shavings and water. Rather than simply adding new grease to some of your components, the old grease should be removed and the surfaces cleaned first. This is especially true in bearings, such as winches or windlasses. Do a good job of this cleaning too. Think about the inside of those very expensive self-tailing winches you have. Take them all apart in a nice, clean environment. Remove all the old grease thoroughly and clean everything. Any dirt or metal shavings that got in there will be suspended in the old grease. Once it's clean, add new grease. Clean, fresh grease. And that's it. What else do you use grease for on your boat, and what brands have you had good experience with? Let everyone know in the comments. I'll see you guys next time.